Welcome to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And we love having our City Current partners come on sharing their expertise. And in this case, we're talking all about sales, strategic leadership, and so much more. We're honored to have with us Lindsay Klein, sales coach with Skillway, where they help you crush your sales goals and love what you do. So, Lindsay, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, Skillway, longtime partner in City Current. So we get to talk all about that. But let's start with your personal story, because you've got a really cool, very different personal storyline in terms of how you got into this profession. So give us a little bit of your background.
Okay, so I actually started in the beer business, which you wouldn't imagine, with the Boston Beer Company, Sam Adams, Angry Orchard, Twisted Tea. They're big dogs, but they're very small in terms of the Millers and Buds of the world. And one of the things they touted at Boston Beer was being a beer professional and expert. So I was pounding the street of Chicago and peddling my little Boston lager with my big backpack and my cooler. And it's funny because people don't see Sam Adams as a craft beer, specifically not in craft cities like Chicago. I kind of worked my way up from there and went to the Pacific Northwest, where I had 5 states, including Alaska, and peddling my little beer in the craftiest area of the country in the Pacific Northwest. Pivoted from there to Las Vegas, where I sold med devices, not as sexy, but still part of my story. And then now I'm here and I get to coach on all the things I learned in my career as a salesperson. So it's just been awesome.
Well, when you talk about being an expert of your craft, I think that goes back even to the beer days and you diving in very deep to becoming an expert in your craft. So talk about that level of expertise.
Yes. So we laugh because I go to craft beer places and breweries in town, and the big bearded plaid hipster beer guys like to school me on beer and what I'm ordering. And it's a tickle for me to have to explain to them that I'm actually a Cicerone, which is an expert in beer. There are very few in the world. And I have this certification, much like a sommelier in wine, that took a lot of training and a lot of testing and a lot of expertise. And so when a big burly bearded brewery guy tries to tell me that my order is incorrect or that I'm smelling something that I don't smell, it's kind of my party trick to be like, oh, well, actually I do. Sorry, dude.
It talks about, the level of dedication to the craft, and obviously carrying into Skillway when you talk about, really diving in deep and understanding the strategy, the nuances, and what makes you different. I think you bring a lot of tools to the equation with Skillway. And so let's go ahead and talk about Skillway overall, because many might know Dew and Shane Tenon, but obviously Skillway is a much larger entity. And so talk about Skillway.
Yes. So Dew and Shane are these powerhouses who created this company. And something that people don't know actually is that besides Shane, we're all women. So all the coaches do. We have a customer service person. We're all women, and we've all taken our experiences in the world of sales and applied it to coaching. Now, what that means is that we've got one-on-one clients, and we also have groups. And the people that we coach take the skills that we implement in coaching and apply them to their businesses. So something we like to say at Skillway is that just because you created a company doesn't mean you know how to sell it. It doesn't mean that you're an automatic salesperson. And it isn't a crutch or a downfall to say, hey, I need help. I don't know how to do this. And that's what we do at Skillway. We have 50 topics that we cover within the portfolio, and they stem from time management to selling skills to lots of different leadership topics. It's really an attitude piece too. We cover a lot of an attitude series, which is holding yourself accountable and creating goals that make sense. And I'm just so proud to be there because it's something that's valuable for everyone in every line of work. We only do relationship-based selling, so no door-to-door sales, only certain people who deal in relationships, B2B. However, there is no industry that we specifically deal with. So any industry is welcome at Skillway, and our coaches are here to help.
Yeah. And I love that you touch on the attitude side of it. And I think that's a very important piece of the equation. And so we have the Skillway business tip at each signature speaker series event. And, that's a big part of it, is providing these tips and strategic, kind of alignment and strategies.
Yes.
And right out of the gates, it's, hey, we're here to help you crush your sales goals, but also love what you do. And I think
that's right.
That attitude piece of it is so important to create the culture, the accountability, but ultimately the passion that people, want to be a part of. And so talk about where it starts. So as you're sitting down with an individual as a business owner, and you're figuring out, okay, where do we need to start? What are the things that you're looking at? What are the questions you like to ask?
Yeah, so every person is totally different. In my portfolio right now, I've got software guys, I have people in the cannabis industry, I have men, I have women, I have CEOs. Everyone is different. Now, if you're looking to build a team, we would start somewhere in the leadership series, and we would walk down that road on training people and hiring and firing. And that looks very different than a one-on-one salesperson who's looking to kind of just learn the sales cycle. I don't really know where to start. I don't know what a needs analysis is. I don't even know how to create a presentation. So these are two very different levels of people. That's not to say that those people might not need the same thing one day. So the path we go down is very different. The questions we're asking are a lot about what's important to you. The first thing I do with a client is I hand over our table of contents and I tell them to highlight topics that they want me to cover. It's not always the choose your own adventure book that they think it's going to be, because frankly, I have an idea of where I want to go. And I think that's what people are paying us to do. But I always try to cover the topics that are important to my clients. We also tend to start in the attitude series. And some people want to get right to sales and numbers and those things, but you have to create a foundation. So like you said, this attitude piece is hugely important. People don't realize sometimes that they aren't really holding themselves accountable to basic habits and basic goals. And sometimes some of those are personal. Sometimes our conversations go to the, I really want to turn my phone off at 5:15 every night because I'm not looking my children in the face. And those conversations are sometimes the most powerful, really. So there's so many ways that those things go, and there's not one size fits all. And that's the beauty of this job. People in typical sales roles find themselves sometimes in a rut of selling the same widget over and over again. I'm never in that position, ever.
Talk about that balance, because as you mentioned, you hand them the guidebook and it's like, what they think. I need to, talk about the features and advantages and benefits versus you're saying, no, it's mindset. Let's go in this direction. Mm-hmm. Talk about that balance of, because I think for individuals around sales, there's not a lot of per se like training that you get on the front end. It's kind of, for most companies, we're going to throw you into the fire and you're going to have to figure this out. And so it's like you go to, okay, well, I've got to sell this, the best way, the features, advantages, benefits, versus building relationships and attitude and some of those. So talk about kind of that balance on your end of helping to figure out the story, but also figuring out the strategy of actually what's going to make them successful.
Yes. The first thing we do actually not the first thing, we give them a table of contents, but something we preliminarily do is we give everyone what's called a DISC assessment. Are you familiar with DISC?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, right. So once you know yourself through this assessment, you start to see things kind of differently, how you're interacting with the world, but also how people perceive you. And it informs a lot of the way people want to go with training. I happen to be a D, which is a dominant personality. My style tends to dominate conversations, dominate rooms, dominate sales. I'm very direct. So when I'm dealing with a client, I really need to be aware of who that person is, because I can overwhelm. And once clients of mine realize who they are, it really does inform the path that they want to go down. Now, being a D, if I coach a D, the two of us kind of have a chuckle because we're like, okay, who's going to take the reins here and who's going to make this adventure fun? And it's always this awesome dichotomy of like, okay, I know we're different people, but that's why I can coach you well, because I know what you need to either improve upon, or I know what your strengths are, and I know what we don't really have to touch on. And a lot of that informs the topics that we cover too.
I know that back to the Skillway business tip, Do touches on a wide variety of topics, everything from gratitude and writing thank you notes to reading and, networking. And so it covers a broad bandwidth. For you, what are some of the areas that you enjoy? When you talk about coaching, leadership, sales strategy, what are the things that you personally are drawn to when it comes to tips, recommendations, and just kind of, diving in deeper on?
Yeah, and I hate to be redundant, but the number one thing that I enjoy teaching and the number one thing that changes people's business is DISC. Hands down, bar none. It's the most aha moments that we have in coaching. And it's not something that you learn and then you table. It's something that you practice for the rest of your life, whether you're dealing in personal situations or business situations. It changes the way that you operate in the world because you're able to identify people in different ways and you're able to get your point across better. So DISC is my favorite thing to teach. I also really love our leadership series. I love it, love it, love it because I'm a D. I love people who love to manage other people. It was part of my old sales life and it's now part of my life as a coach. So I think those two are my favorites, but they're interchangeable too. So there's DISC and leadership and there's leadership and DISC.
Yeah. And like you said, once you have a better understanding of yourself and your strengths and weaknesses, and then do that with your team so you better understand it, like understanding yourself is extremely powerful. And the way that others perceive you and you interact with them, it really does change, the way you view yourself and others and how you interact. So I agree 1000%.
Yeah.
Talk about success stories. So give us an illustration of how Skillway has been able to help and get either an individual or an organization headed in the direction that they want to go.
Yeah. So there's so many success stories of people, like I said, who start a business. They have a great idea, but it doesn't mean that they're a salesperson. It doesn't mean they know how to hire and fire. It doesn't mean they know how to delegate tasks. It doesn't. In fact, it's quite the opposite. When you've been a one-man band this whole time and you don't know how to delegate tasks, there's a very aha moment in thinking, what's the value of my time? Is this a revenue producing activity? Is this creating income for me? And a lot of times the answer is no. So success stories range in all different capacities, but I think when it's a leader or someone who is a high producer and they just need tweaks in their business model, or if they've never actually sold anything before, there are these moments where you get the phone call, not during a coaching call, in a weird weekend or a nighttime phone call, and they say, I just sold $1 million and it's because I used this thing you taught me. I can't explain what that's like, but it's the happiest I've ever been in a job. It's so wonderful because it's not something you read in a book. It's really not. It's something that you garner from another individual. And I just appreciate being able to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Around delegation, give us one tip. I know it's hard, in a general context, but give us a tip because I think all of us probably struggle. I know I do with delegation. And so it's like, give us a tip around delegation.
Well, first of all, we do an exercise at Skillway that calculates the value of your time. And once you do that, you can decide if you are able to hire an assistant. People think that they are not able to hire an assistant either because they can't afford it or because they think they have to do everything themselves. And that's just simply not true. Having someone to delegate to frees you up to do the things that make you money. And once you calculate the value of your time, whatever number that is, you realize that you're working at different skill sets and different pay grades. And so if something is the work that an assistant can do feasibly, then you should probably have one because that person can work at $15 an hour when you're actual rate is $150 an hour. So I think that's a huge delegation piece. People specifically who think in terms of numbers and bottom line really need to see what their value is and how much their hourly rate actually is. Because if you're typing an email that could be a template at your rate, is that something someone else could do? And the answer is typically yes.
Well, and just the power and the clarity around here's what your rate is, and here's what you're doing, and here's the amount of time you could peel off that would justify that cost, just like you're talking about, and allow you to better focus to even up that, on your end. I think, it goes back to knowledge is power, and being able to see that in the actual numbers. Yes. That's where, you can start making real decisions that have a profound impact on your business.
Totally.
Give us one other just favorite recommendation tip when it comes to leadership, coaching, sales strategy. What's just another general one that pops into your head in terms of being more effective for all of us?
Being more effective. I think it's really important to remember that just because you're used to doing something one way doesn't mean that that's the way it always has to be. We really need to be resilient. We really need to pivot, and we really need to think about our habits that are worth changing, because it'll make you more money. It'll make you more money. So that's something that I think is just a general all around. Let's start thinking about who we are as people, who everyone else is around us, and how can we pivot and make more money.
Yeah, I love it. This is one of those conversations could go on forever, but go ahead and wrap up with where we can continue the conversation on your end online. So website, social media, phone numbers, where would you direct us to go to learn more and get involved with you and Skillway?
Yep. So we're skillway.com. You can connect with me, Lindsay Klein, on LinkedIn. Skillway is also on LinkedIn, and we're also on Instagram and about everywhere else you can find us. But skillway.com is where I would start, and then connect with me, Lindsay Klein, on LinkedIn.
Well, Lindsay, thank you for all you and your amazing team do. Thank you for your City Current partnership as well. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.